Color guard, please present the colors.
Color guard, forward, march. Prepare to pose. Pose.
Please uncover and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated. I'd like to call to the podium Jason Hill.
Good evening, everyone. I know you don't know me real well, but maybe something can be said for talking about one of my favorite hobbies, which is going to estate sales and auctions, not necessarily to buy something really cheap, but to buy a little piece of that person and help figure out the puzzle. Were they in the military? Were they, what did they do? What is this person about? And it was last year that I finally came upon one that confounded me tremendously in this very small town in southern Illinois called Trenton. Both of the husband and wife had passed, and they were doing an estate sale to sell the things that their kids didn't want to sell themselves. What I found in a garage, that's an easy way of saying a shanty, in the dirt, were these medals that you'll be able to see later on today. Purple Heart, a folded flag, a bronze star, all of these medals earned by a man called Pete Coma. Do we have Pete? That's Pete. Pete was also a prisoner of war in Germany. He was, I'll let Matt go into the history of what these medals here have explained to us, and still, much remains to be seen. As the rest of the records, unfortunately, there was a fire in St. Louis at the facility before they could fully digitize, and Pete's information was no longer available to us. So we've had fun toying with that throughout the week because it's very, very interesting, and Matt is extraordinarily knowledgeable about that too. Where is Matt, by the way? Yeah, come on, Matt. Oh, you're up there, right? Okay, he's next. So I would like to throw it over to Matt, because actually details what these medals are and what these medals mean. We get a little bit of Pete every time he does that. So what we want to do is just listen to Pete through Mr. Cream. Yeah. We'll take it from there. Gentlemen, I'm going to give you my friend and colleague, Matt Cream.
Gentlemen, citizens,
Mom always told you not to judge a book by its cover, right? I hope so, or I need to chastise Mom, right? In the military world, we can judge a book by its cover at least a little bit. In that, well, let's start with something simple. If you all haven't figured out already, you can tell by this rather stupid-looking hat that anybody's wearing one of these silly hats, including the late great President Ronald Reagan, wore a simple blue hat like this. They're a United States veteran, United States Armed Forces, military veteran, right? But in the military, we learned very quickly that you have to look at the face of the book, particularly if there's a higher rank like an officer. You're supposed to salute that higher officer, otherwise you're in trouble in the PG version, right? You're in trouble. So we got to judge the book a little bit by its cover, but you go a little bit deeper, we can start discovering quite a lot about a person just based on what's their uniform, not just their rank. Yes, we got to look at their rank. But we decorate our uniforms with different things. And you can tell, oh, that guy's got a ranger tab. He might be a pretty tough character. I'll leave the explicitives out there. You can fill in the blanks, right? We can see, oh, he deployed with the 82nd Airborne Division. Oh, little decorations. For example, one of them, a close friend of mine years later, my chaplain. Most officers, it's like if you're a private nobody like I was, you see an officer, it's like, oh, I gotta salute him. But I saw an enlisted insignia on his uniform. He was prior enlisted. It's like, that's a good conduct medal on his uniform, meaning he was a private once upon a time. He was a peon like me. I think I can trust that guy. We learn how to read a book a little bit by its cover. And that's what we can do with Pete. Even though we don't have the stories, we do have a picture. I found that online for his obituary, added a little bit to his story. But Pete's insignia, so Jason had discovered really fascinating stuff. Pete's not here to tell stories, but the insignia tells a multiplicity of stories. I'll share just a slice, right? The first one's kind of interesting. I'm what we call a 5-jump chump. I've got these airborne wings right up here, a little miniaturized version. You got to do 5 jumps. I said even there are 9 jumps because I have my eyes closed, right? 5-jump chump, that's what we call it. Just to get that flashy badge, well, I knew those airborne wings, but he had an extra star and then a wreath around one too. You know what that means? I had to look it up because I wasn't quite sure. Pete did at least 65 jumps, jumping from a good airplane. This is not the little light tap down on the ground. No, they hit the ground at 30 to 40 miles an hour. I've seen many people that are severely disabled from hitting the ground at that speed. I wouldn't survive it today. Your age, that's a young man's sport. Nonetheless, Pete had at least 65 jumps. I know, based on that insignia, on what his airborne wings has a star and a wreath around it. He was a master parachutist. We know that he served in World War II. Actually, he retired. He served some sort of full career. But it just keeps getting more interesting. I don't know Air Force insignia much, so I had to look this stuff up. So he also has he has a crew chief badge, all levels of the crew chief badge. So he has a master aircraft badge. We don't know what position he played on an aircraft, but I had to look this up. Some of you people that know about flight hours have heard a couple of things this week. So for the master badge, master aircraft crew badge, whatever role he played in a crew, he had to log at least 3,000 mission hours in an aircraft. 3,000. At least 65 jumps. Maybe he did 165. We don't know. There is no more higher award than master parachutist. There is no higher award badge, I guess is the proper nomenclature, of master aircraft crew badge. Pete was the master. But it doesn't stop there. Pete's story gets far better and far more profound if you follow me just a little deeper. Maybe you've seen this before. If you see it on eBay, it's illegal. Pete was awarded the Purple Heart. I take that right back. Pete was bestowed the Purple Heart. Does anybody know what the Purple Heart is? a few of you. Now the rest of you, all of us are going to know. The Purple Heart is for being wounded in combat. We don't know if he got a piece of shrapnel, if he got... What wound that he had, we don't know for certain. But the Purple Heart is bestowed on the individual. It's not a word, it's not something that you go out there to achieve, right? You don't seek to be wounded in combat, do you? I don't think, well, it's doubtful. I've not met one Purple Heart recipient just yet that was right after that Purple Heart. I don't think you're looking to get hit. But Pete has a Purple Heart. Even more significant, we're only halfway in here. When you're going to stroll by at the very end, and you can see the Purple Heart is on the far, I believe it'd be on your left-hand side right now. I believe it's my right-hand side. It's purple. I tilted it back so the light would hit it. That's a Purple Heart. If you see it on eBay, don't buy it, because technically that's illegal. I can't buy a Purple Heart. You can't buy it. I can go to the PX. I have a retired ID card. I can't buy a Purple Heart. You can, or at least you shouldn't. It's against the law. It's called stolen valor. But the Purple Heart, we don't know, but more than likely, it was attributed to another big phase of Pete's career, and that he was instrumental in establishing a prisoner of war community after his service. Pete was captured in combat. What camp in Germany, we're not certain. But Pete was captured and interred in a prisoner of war camp. And transparency, has anybody ever seen the field? Yeah, there. It's even waving up there. How cool. Oh, there's a Purple Heart. Oh, thank you, Pete, you guys. I borrowed this from Squirrel. Thank you. Squirrel's not here. I don't have a POW flag. Shame on me. Matt's going to fix that this next week. You ever seen this? When I was your age, I'd already enlisted in the U.S. Army, but frankly, I didn't know who this Pau Mia guy was, but he must have done something cool to have his own flag, right? Pau Mia. That's POW, missing in action. I'm not doing a very good job with this flag. It sounded good in my head, right? So you might see these flags. Well, I'm pretty sure every U.S. Postal Service office has a POW flag flying below the U.S. colors, right? It's pretty significant. What you might not know if you didn't know what those acronyms stand for is that, gentlemen your age, there is still the missing in action part. Pete is not missing in action. He's accounted for. He was returned. We'll come back around to his return. Missing in action. To this day, in just the Vietnam War, just in Illinois, there are 64 Illinoisans that were your age sitting in your seats that are still missing in action. Their names are inscribed on a marble wall in Oak Ridge Cemetery in Springfield, where Lincoln's tomb is. Oh, it's nearby Lincoln's tomb. 64 and counting. We find remains, we identify them, and then we can finally let their families know that they're found and return their remains to their family. But there's still 64 that went missing just from Vietnam that have never been returned home. Their families don't know. Illinoisans, just like you, just like me, right? Thankfully, Pete was found. He was liberated, and maybe most profoundly in his liberation, I speculate. Clearly, purely speculation, whether or not was Pete wounded in the act of the incident. Did his aircraft crash, get shot down, and that's how he was captured? That's speculation. Maybe both incidences occurred together. The Purple Heart, that is, and the prisoner of war. Of course, he has received the prisoner of war medal as well. But he was liberated, captured, held in Germany, liberated, and this is probably the coolest thing. Pete could have, he had the option that he could retire right then and there, receive full pension benefits for the rest of his life, but he did not. Why would anybody that goes through that go back into the fray? Nobody wants to be in combat, I don't think. Not met one yet. Pete went back to serve a cause greater than himself. World War II was a significant more significant than you and I can grasp, I think. Such a significant, pivotal time in world history. I believe that Pete he's not here to say it, but I believe Pete found the cause greater than himself, that he knew what he had to do. He had to get back out there and help his brothers, help his country, help humanity. And so he went back on to serve. I know this specifically because the third medal in line there, this is a very, very exceedingly rare award. We're not even sure how many numbers there are, but it's only a couple thousand. It's a very exceedingly rare award. It's called, I had to write this down. Can't remember this stuff. It's called the, oh shucks, I didn't write it down. It's a humanitarian award for the Berlin airlift. I have to explain just a little bit to grasp. So, the conclusion of World War II, Pete is liberated, he goes back, even though he could have retired from active service and nobody would blame him, right? He could say, thank you for your service, enjoy your pension, make the best out of whatever PTSD in life that you can manage after this. No, he went back and finished a full career, which included, after the Germans surrendered, the conclusion of World War II. During the war, this big wall was built. Anybody heard of the Berlin Wall? There we go, there's some hands. Put your arm down. Now stick it back up again. Come on, get the blood flowing. I know I've been talking too long. There you go. Good. The Berlin Wall. I remember, I don't remember, I was probably too young. Ronald Reagan, he said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall, right? Well, that wall had separated, it basically cut this, the Russians had essentially cut off this portion of Germany, and they were isolated, they were starving to death. You'll see how this comes into play. They were starving to death, they were ill supplied. The Russians certainly, they couldn't feed their own people, let alone feed people that they didn't want. So, the U.S. mobilized what we call the Berlin airlift, and Pete participated because his medal is right there, the third one on the line. I don't have a picture of it on the slideshow, sorry. Even the tech guy can't work that magic. Pete was liberated. He was wounded, captured by the German army, and then he turned around after he's liberated, didn't go home. He went back to help those that were suffering left behind. So the quote here, in order to be awarded that medal, is required to have performed over 120 days of duty in direct support of the Berlin airlift from June 1948 to September 1949. At least 120 service days in there that he was participating in bringing food and supplies to a nationality of folks that had wounded him and enslaved him and captured him. I think that speaks volume to who Pete is, right? And who we should be representing in our country, in our state, in our counties, and in our cities, right? That's called a legacy. And after all that, serving a full career, even though he didn't have to, he still went on and retired from active duty service after he served a full career. And finally retired. But no, his service is not done just even yet. Why? How do I know? I've never met Pete. You've ever met Pete? Nobody's ever met Pete, right? Well, nobody here in this room. No, he didn't stop there. I tell my legionnaires, I'm commander of my American Legion post, that, hey, you took off your active duty service uniform and you put on a new uniform. Your community still needs you. There's still service to be done. Pete was active in American Legion post, VFW, Disabled American Veterans Organization, also 2 ex-prisoner of war organizations, 2 different ones. So he spent a large portion of the rest of his life serving the community such as in a capacity supporting the American Legion, which sponsors this program, right? For the rest of his life. Why? Why all that? Why continue to work? Why continue to serve? Pete can't be here to speak for himself, but I think these things speak volumes in that I believe that Pete found the service greater than himself. I believe that Pete saw how important our nation is not just to ourselves, but to the world around. I encourage you to take his legacy, take it to heart. This memorial service is in memory of Pete. This little case is a memorial of Pete. If you hadn't figured out the triangular flag, that is his casket flag. Did I see the funeral? Did I fold that flag? No. But it is the casket-sized flag. It's with his stuff, so we presume that to be from his casket. So this is Pete's memorial, this thing right down here. You're going to file by it. You'll take a little closer look. And we could probably talk more about it, but I want you to consider a service above yourselves like Pete. Why else would he do it if it wasn't great satisfaction? Why would he continue to establish foundations, organizations such as ex-prisoners of war? Maybe because some of his brothers have suffered from PTSD and other issues, adaptations. His service was not complete. Your service is not complete. Fellow legionnaires, brothers, as long as you have air left in your lungs, your service is not complete. You, every one of you, the future is right now. We are inviting you, we're coaching you, encouraging you to take part as somebody like Pete, to take part in our society, being productive, being a leader in whatever capacity is needed, whatever your gifting is, you find it. Pete had some sort of particular expertise in parachuting. He probably taught a lot of people how to crash land at 40 miles an hour and not die. Clearly he was quite the expert and literally master aircraft crew badge. And that translated later on in life that he's got this POW experience that he can help some of his brothers that were POWs cope and learn how to become more involved in our society. You don't have to become prisoner of war to be active in your community today. You're here, that's the first step. You continue living out Pete's legacy. That is the highest thank you that you can give to anybody such as Pete. Remember what he did for you and carry that torch forward. Thank you, gentlemen.
At least once every year, as spring turns to summer, I make a pilgrimage to a patch of green hills that overlook our nation's capital. 639 acres of ancient trees and meadows, through which neat ranks of white marble slabs stretch as far as one's eye can see. This is our sacred shrine to service and sacrifice, our nation's most hallowed ground, Arlington National Cemetery. I don't, of course, make this trip alone. Time and again, I have followed a route frequented by the over 3 million visitors who come to Arlington each year. To the grave of Navy Lieutenant John Fitzgerald Kennedy and its eternal flame. To the monument on which the names of famed generals are engraved. To the tomb of the unknowns to experience the changing of the guard, that most reverent ritual practiced to perfection. Year after year, I have taken this route to sites whose stories are well known and well told. But this year, I traveled a different path. I followed one of Arlington's many roads south. I went to Section 60. Here you will not find presidents, admirals, or generals, no towering monuments or elaborate memorials. A 14-acre plot visited more often by mourners than tourists, Section 60 is the final home to the soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen lost in America's latest war. For a great deal of the country, the longest war in our nation's history took place mostly out of sight. United States service members fought in Iraq and Afghanistan, while at home life continued largely as normal. No war taxes, no draft notices, none of that shared sacrifice that accompanied our nation's earlier conflicts. The exception to this national blind spot is Section 60. This postage stamp of earth is where families, friends, and old comrades come to mourn and remember, to speak of heroism and humanity of the deceased, to laugh, to cry, to tell their stories. They're placed beside veterans of World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, who have pitched their own tents in the eternal campgrounds of Arlington. Indeed, more than half of Section 60 is occupied by veterans who fought in these earlier conflicts, lived to old age, and earned their place in Arlington. Since 2003, they have silently welcomed their younger brethren into the soil. Many of Section 60's newest residents arrived in pieces, the result of our latest conflict's particular weapons, suicide bombs, and improvised explosive devices. Army Captain Russell Brian Ripito entered Arlington in this way and as the first casualty of the Iraq War buried here. He now lies at grave number 60-7860. Corporal Benjamin S. Kopp, a 21-year-old Army Ranger who died from injuries sustained in Afghanistan, came to Arlington almost whole. In the packet of papers known as the Blue Book, amongst details like next of kin, religious affiliation, and funeral rites, in Section 2, line 25, Kopp had checked yes next to the words organ donor. Corporal Kopp's body now rests intact, but for his heart, which beats faithfully in the chest of Judy Meikle of Winnetka, Illinois. If you visit Arlington, you may find, upon grave number 60-9088, a heart-shaped rock and the woman who put it there. A memorial to a man she never knew, but to whom she owes her life. Army Private First Class Ross A. McGinnis joined the ranks of Section 60 as its first Medal of Honor recipient from Iraq or Afghanistan. He saved the lives of 4 soldiers by pouncing on a live grenade. At grave number 60-8544, he lies beneath a tombstone engraved with that highest of military honors, forever 19 years of age. Many survived their time downrange, came home, and tried to settle into civilian life, only to find that the war still raged in their minds. Post-traumatic stress disorder, known as PTSD, and other invisible injuries led them home to Arlington. This is the story of Master Sergeant Sean M. Mokaby, a decorated Green Beret known as a level-headed professional and steadying figure in any situation. At over 40 years old, the repeated deployments began to show their wear. Like far too many of our strongest and bravest, Mokaby lost his life to suicide. Grave number 60-8608. For 2 decades, Section 60 has been the most living section of the cemetery and monument to our nation's fallen. At the height of the conflict, it was the site of constant funerals. Throughout it has brimmed with activity. Families celebrating birthdays and anniversaries, comrades sharing a drink with an old friend, wounded warriors and their families finding therapy within its perimeter. It is where children bring report cards for mom's review, and wives show sonograms of unborn children to stone markers. Love letters, birthday balloons, a few fresh homemade cookies, and a jar of sand from a favorite beach are just some of the humble gifts offered to the dead. A solemn spot, but full of life. While many of those who reside in Section 60 remain in eternal youth, their most loyal visitors do themselves creep toward mortality. In the coming years, parents who outlive their sons and daughters will rejoin them. Spouses and friends will reunite, and even those who are now just children will have their opportunity to catch up on lost time with their parents in the hereafter. In not too long, Section 60 will find itself as the rest of Arlington, a field of bone-white tombs visited less by mourners and more by those lost tourists fingering through guidebooks on their way to more popular sites. In not too long, Section 60 will too fall inactive, if we let it. Too often we hold our recognition for the well-known names, well-tread paths, and popular symbols. The presidents, the generals, the quote, notable. Let us not only celebrate those who lived in fame or died in acts of storybook bravery. Let us not reserve our attention only to those service members already passed. Our gratitude should not start when the grave is dug, nor should it end when the final note of taps fades. Let the spirit of Section 60 crowd at every corner of Arlington and our nation. May Section 60 remind us to make every place and every day a living testament to those who served.
That was Max first, gentlemen. Well done, Max. At this point in time in the evening, I would like to call up to the stage our Legionnaires, Sons of the American Legion, all current and former military members. Please follow the aisle and be careful, but come on.
What we'd like to do now is take a moment to remember our fallen and our service members who have served so proudly for our country. And we're going to be singing, and we'd like you to join us in the chorus of Good Night Saigon. Please stand. The words will be on the back wall. Please stand. No.
Please remain standing. Color guard, advance and retrieve the colors.
Color guard. 10, 4, mark. Retreat.
You may be seated.
This evening, you will be dismissed in a different fashion. You will be dismissed row by row, starting in the front and going to the back. The county counselors will assist you to leave the auditorium in an orderly and quiet fashion. You will be passing in front of the stage so that you may pay respect to those fallen soldiers like Pete and so many of your past brethren of Premier Boys State who have paid the last full measure of service to you and our great country by sacrificing their lives.